China is a nation that has a lengthy and eventful history to its name. The manner in which offenders have been punished in China throughout the millennia is one of the most fascinating parts of the country's history. Some of the most horrific techniques for torturing offenders were practiced in ancient China. Strangely, it was the teachings of Confucius that inspired China to create punishments so horrific and soul-tearing that even the most hardened criminals would wet themselves. Let's dig out the top 10 most horrific punishments in ancient China. Number 10. The death by 1,000 cuts. The Ling Chi, also called death by slicing or death by 1,000 cuts, first appeared in the 10th century according to Britannica. Ling Chi was universally viewed as the cruelest kind of prison punishment. These punishments were designated for people who committed one of the 10 abominations, the country's most serious offenses: treason, mutilation, patricide, husband murder, insurrection, and witchcraft were among them. The victim would have their body dismembered piece by piece until they died from their wounds. The first step was to bind the convict to a wooden frame and stretch their arms and legs out in front of them. Executioners used sharp knives to cut tiny slits in the victim's flesh, beginning at the tips of the fingers and toes and working their way upwards. Number 9. Forced labor. As part of this form of punishment, the condemned would be made to work on public works projects like constructing roads or digging canals. The ancient Chinese people's hard work in building the Great Wall is a great example of this punishment. In those days, mechanical aids did not exist. In this case, human effort was crucial to the success of the project. They employed millions of people who lived and worked among the seemingly endless mountains and sheer cliffs. The historical record shows that the labor force consisted of 3 classes: soldiers, commoners, and criminals. They struggled in unsafe conditions, and many of them didn't make it home alive. Number 8. Rhinotomy. Rhinotomy, more commonly known as nose cutting, was a method of punishment that was utilized in ancient China for the execution of a wide range of criminal offenses. The culprit was required to have all or part of their nose cut off as part of their sentence, which frequently resulted in severe disfigurement and impairment. The usage of rhinotomy as a form of punishment can be traced all the way back to the Shang dynasty, 1600–1046 BC, and it continued to be used throughout the successive dynasties. It is usually reserved for significant crimes such as treason, insurrection, and murder, although it may also be inflicted for lesser transgressions such as theft and adultery. Number 7. Tattooing. Punishment by tattooing was common in ancient China, especially under the Qin, 221–206 BCE, and Han dynasties, 206 BCE, 220 CE. As a method of permanent identification, tattoos were employed on criminals and slaves throughout the Qin dynasty. Such tattoos would often be found on the face, forehead, or arms, and they served as a visual symbol of the wearer's criminal or slave status. There were times when the markings were used to indicate the nature of the crime. Throughout the Han era, tattoos were a more severe penalty, meted out only for the most heinous of offenses like treason or murder. These tattoos were typically more intricate than others and covered a larger area on the body, like your back or chest. The tattoos, which would be visible to society, would serve as a permanent reminder of the criminal activity committed by the individual. Number 6. Yua was a form of capital punishment that was reserved for the most terrible of crimes, including treason, insurrection, and significant transgressions committed against the emperor. A razor-sharp blade, generally a huge knife or an axe, would be used to amputate either the offender's left foot or left hand. After then, the severed limb would be put on display in the open for everyone to see as a signal to others. The purpose of Yue was to permanently disfigure and paralyze the criminal so that they could never commit crime again. The penalty served 2 purposes. It showed the strength of the reigning dynasty and discouraged others from committing similar acts. Number 5. Gong. The practice of permanently removing a person's reproductive organs as a form of punishment is referred to as gong. Castration was performed on the male victims of this punishment. One of the most well-known victims was Sima Qian, 145 BC, 86 BC, well known as the emasculated father of conventional Chinese history writing. It's possible that female victims of the gong were subjected to punishments, such as having a thick stick pounded into their stomachs, in an effort to cause some type of harm to their wombs. Number 4. Slow drip torture. It was among the most heinous methods of torture and the death penalty. They would take the victim to a public square and bind them to a wooden board or frame. The person would have water slowly drip from their forehead for several days. For reasons that remain unclear, administrators occasionally used acid in the drips. It would take time for the acid to strip away the skin and reach the brain. In time, the victim's forehead would develop a small hole from the constant abrasion caused by the water drops. As time went on, the hole widened and deepened, revealing the underlying bone and resulting in the victim's deaths. Number 3. Neck tower. The neck tower was another execution method that was a little less gruesome. In one version, the prisoner is placed in a wooden box with a stone floor and a projecting neck. Yet a stone or two is taken away every day to ensure that the wretched prisoner dies a slow death by strangulation. Offenders were sometimes dragged to marketplaces or other public locations and made to parade about while holding signs or placards outlining their crimes. Number 2. Kang. It was standard practice to impose a wide wooden cane around the offender's neck for several weeks or months as punishment for minor crimes. A wooden board or frame, known as a kang, was hung over the criminal's neck and fastened in place with a lock or chain. Offender mobility and comfort were severely restricted by the board's typically hefty and thick wood construction. The tongue was plastered with evidence of the crime. The gravity of the offense was used to establish the length of the sentence. Number 1. Beatings. A wooden rod or bamboo stick would be used to strike the offender in the back or buttocks as part of the punishment. If the crime was particularly egregious, then the offender could expect a harsher penalty in the form of a greater number of strokes. Infections that got in through the skin's opening were the main reason people died after getting severely beaten. The severity of the beatings could be lessened by paying a bribe, and the wealthiest inmates may even avoid the punishment altogether thanks to an official sliding scale of fees. Which form of punishment do you consider to be the cruelest? Tell us in the comments what you think. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.